many psychedelics, and each has a very different nature, very different experience. But ayahuasca is deeply insightful.
How do you know if what you've been given through your experience with this medicine is genius or just a random flight of fancy that you have?
The plant is pure power, and you do not just hand out power to people who are not ready for it.
Even as I'm listening to you say that, I can't help but think about the ayahuasca experience itself. It's not known for being particularly gentle.
The first question you need to ask yourself is that, are you just doing this as a bucket list experience? Are you doing it because it's trending?
I agree that the idea of taking responsibility is something that is scary for people. Welcome back to the Webdelics podcast. We have Ti0 in the house. The topic we're going to be discussing today is really interesting. It is how psychedelics, particularly ayahuasca, but some of the other ones too, can help you access power and creativity. We're not only going to talk about how you can access it, but how you can actually live and embody those things rather than having insights about them and revelations, and then 3 months later you've forgotten that anything ever happened. Life is back to what it was, in which case there's sort of this whole what's the point thing going on. So Ti0, welcome to the show. It is so good to have you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to see you again. And I'm really excited about this conversation because power and genius are really two of my favorite topics. And I feel like it's a dimension of psychedelics and ayahuasca and entheogens, sacred plants, whatever you want to call them. It's a dimension that's relatively not spoken about as much. There's a lot of emphasis on mental health, healing, trauma, somewhat about mysticism and spirituality, but power and genius, I feel, are two really interesting topics, which let's see how it goes today when we talk about it.
Yeah, I will totally agree with you, particularly with regards to power. There is a lot of cultural discomfort with power in the West, at least, as the subject of discussion, perhaps because, at least in the United States, there is an association of power with abuse and kings and tyrants and things like that have caused people, in my opinion, to somehow misassociate it only with oppression and domination. I assume, though, that that's not what you're talking about. And maybe that's a good way for us to begin to move into the discussion. But because there are a lot of lay folks who are watching this episode or listening to it for the first time, could you explain, just so that everyone is on the same page, exactly what ayahuasca is? Maybe you could talk a little bit about how it came into your life.
Sure. So my whole spiritual journey started very unintentionally and accidentally. Accident in quotes, obviously. I came to Brazil in 2014 on a suggestion of a dear friend of mine who wanted to come and watch the soccer World Cup that was happening back then. And I had no interest in sports and soccer, especially. So, and I had learned about ayahuasca, and I just had my first LSD experience at the time, and I was so excited. It was such a great experience at it. And then I heard that ayahuasca is the most powerful psychedelic in the world. So I was like, if LSD is this great, of course I want to do ayahuasca. So for me, the intention was to get high. And I knew that South America is the place, especially back in 2014, it wasn't as global. And I knew South America was a place to do it. And then when the suggestion for Brazil came up, I was like, yes, okay, we can go for soccer for you and ayahuasca for me. So that's how ayahuasca entered my life. And for those who don't know what it is, it's a brew, it's a tea that's made from two plants which are considered sacred plants by the people who discovered them and who make the tea originally. Today it's become something quite different. Especially in the West, it's being looked at from a very pharmaceutical oriented mindset, but originally it's really considered something sacred. And I know that that word is pretty taboo in the West, talking about the divine and the sacred, but that's the original context of it.
I am looking at your background. Those who are watching this show on YouTube are probably looking at it too. Those who are listening to it, unfortunately, can't see it. It's really beautiful. But something tells me that maybe once you got to Brazil, you didn't leave.
I did not want to leave, but I did leave for a bit. So when I had my awakening, I came to get high, but I had my spiritual awakening. And this is not something that happens to everyone. So I just want to make it clear it's not typical. I was working as a software developer at Amazon. It's not typical for people to quit their jobs and move to the jungle. Just want to make that clear. That was my journey. And for me, it was a clear revelation. I actually saw my future in my first retreat. I was shown my path. I was shown moments from the future which have actually happened over the past decade. And I would say it was more like an alternate timeline was shown to me, and I was given the option. But for me, there was actually no option. I knew that I'm going to do it. My heart spoke for the first time. For the first time, I had a heart desire. It was not a mind desire, but my heart said, I want this. And at that time, I knew that there was no other way but to go down that path. So I went back to working for Amazon for about 6 months, during which time I was actually promoted, which enabled me to take a sabbatical and try out this lifestyle for 3 months before fully committing to it. So I actually got to live here and start my training with the guarantee of going back to a job if I do not like that lifestyle. And it only got better and better over the next 3 months that I came for that sabbatical, after which I did quit and I moved to the jungle. I've been living here for over 10 years now.
Wow. So there are some things that were embedded in that portion of your story that I want to just explore a little bit further and underscore. First of all, you do hear these stories in the psychedelic space of people that go on these sacred journeys. They quit their jobs, they move, they decide to wholly throw themselves into psychedelic facilitation or some sort of shamanistic or sacred training with regards to these plants, divorce their spouses, right? Do all sorts of things. And one of the things that I just want to thank you for is for saying that you didn't just do that, right? Like that you had some sort of backup in the event that for whatever reason this understanding of what your future was ended up not working out the way that you thought it might. Is that something that you generally recommend people do? Would you have done this if you had not had that sort of option to go back to Amazon?
I was fully committed to it because, like I said, I had this heart desire. The sabbatical was really just a divine gift that happened. I was already going to do it. It realistically, it just made my parents more at ease, my family more at ease, than more than anything for me. But at the same time, I was 24. I I did not need that big of a parachute. I knew that if I did not like it, I could reapply for a job and I would. I was really excelling in my career, so I knew that if I wanted to go back, it would not be difficult for me. So I did have a few parachutes. So now I've been in the facilitation space for over a decade. I've taken ayahuasca over 600 times now, and I've given ayahuasca. I've facilitated over, I would say, maybe like 4 to 5,000 individual unique experiences. So I've pretty much seen everything, and the general advice always has been take your time to integrate and process and make any big decisions. Like, do not make big life decisions right after drinking ayahuasca or during drinking ayahuasca. Is just, you know giving weight to a big decision, I think, is so uh it's really not something people do often. They think that, oh, they can just make a decision and they can go back on their word. People's word doesn't really have a lot of weight these days. They say things and then they go back on it all the time. I've been that person a lot also, but I learned that I do this and I saw many people doing it and I wanted to change that. And this is something I teach people also now, is like how to stay true to your word. So if you're giving your word, if you're saying or going to do something, you don't have an option to back out of it. So that is the weight you give to the decision, is that I am in and I am all in.
I love that. And unfortunately, I think that few people watching or listening will disagree with your comment about the weight that people's words have anymore. It's almost like honor is something that has practically disappeared from our vocabulary, but that is a subject for a different podcast.
Not exactly, because I feel like it's so related to power. Since we started this conversation about power, right? I feel like this is where our power lives. Our power is in our word. Our power is in the commitments that we make. It's in our honor. It's in our integrity. That is real power. Otherwise, it's just an idea of power. It's just this fluff that. So, I will step back a bit. You said there's this whole narrative about power being associated with abuse in the West, and it's very true. There's a lot of stigma around not, especially pursuing power, but even talking about power is pretty tricky. And at the same time, we have this big movement going on, especially in the West, called empowerment. It's so funny that there's this whole empowerment movement going on, but talking about power, just if you don't put M and end at the end of it, if you just talk about power, suddenly it becomes abuse. And I really believe that the empowerment movement doesn't actually talk about real power. It's an idea of power. It's this very also feminized idea of power, which is, as long as you are within the rules and you don't do certain things, you can be empowered. Like that's my interpretation of the empowerment movement, is that it's extremely confined to a very specific idea of what is permitted. With the whole cancel culture, you can have power as long as you don't offend people. You have to be woke at the same time. You have to make sure that you know all the terms, and you like only then you can have power, which basically makes it impossible. The woke culture is that you can never be right. You will always be cancelled if you speak with power. Always someone who's going to be offended. Always someone who's going to misinterpret intentionally or unintentionally what you actually want to say. So I feel like this dichotomy is so interesting. We talk about empowerment, but we are so uncomfortable with power.
So let's break it down. What is the difference between empowerment and having power?
Technically, there should be no difference. Realistically, I feel like it's about what I just said. And what having real power would be is that you are, like I said, living with honor and integrity. You're true to your word, and you have a mission. You have a real mission, and you are living for your mission. You're living for your purpose. You're living to fulfill what you're meant to do. You're using your power for something real. Not just to talk, not just to argue, not just to take other people down, but to actually build something, to create something real, meaningful, lasting. A lot of people just want to tear down those who have power and who are doing something. Whether they're doing good or evil is not my judgment to make. At least they're doing something. Do something. If you don't like what is, create an alternative. Instead of just, there's so much energy being spent on tearing the old down instead of building something new. Finally, what will we be left with? If we just keep tearing the old, there's nothing left. We have to build something new which will gradually and automatically replace. If it's better, it's just going to replace the old. It's how life has unfolded this far on this planet. When there is a better alternative, the old just phases out. It just happens.
I wonder then if talking about and thinking through the concept of replacing the abuse of power or bad, quote unquote, bad manifestations of power that people are unhappy with, and replacing it with something is related to the concept of genius, which you have tied to power right from the beginning of this discussion.
Absolutely. And that is exactly what I was going to say next, is that what do you replace it with? And that's where our genius comes in. That's exactly where psychedelics and ayahuasca open up our minds to new possibilities, new realities, new ways of doing things. But we have to follow through. And that requires power. So Ayahuasca gives us access to genius, but we have to bring our power to make it real. Otherwise, nothing happens. We just stay in the same cycles, repeating the same things. And this is what I've seen so much in the space. People get access to so much genius, so much beauty, and nothing happens. They just go back to the same old habits, watching Netflix and chilling and getting high, getting numb, just being in the rut because there's so much fear. There's so much fear of losing job, losing insurance, all the safeties. Like there's so much attachment to fear. And that's exactly for me, power and fear are literally two parallel things. And so let's go a bit deeper into this. A lot of the abuse of power that you spoke about, right, or abusive power, is not actual power, in my opinion. That is fear disguised as power. That is insecurity, which needs to control people, which needs to dominate other people, which needs to manipulate other people. For me, that's not real power at all. Power does not respond to fear. For me, that is real power. Is that is just solid in itself. Doesn't need to react to fear at all. Fear reacts to fear, and it creates an illusion of power to control the fear. So, as long as we think that power has anything to do with fear, as long as it comes as a reaction to fear, we are not actually in real power at all. Real power comes from the source. It's creativity. It's that fire to create something that has come through divine genius. It's for me, genius is access to the divine. It's a divine idea has come to me, and I'm going to bring it to this world. It's not in reaction to anything. It's just pure source energy.
I was at the gym the other day and I was innocently doing my little exercises and about to put up a piece of equipment that I was using. And there was this big, huge, probably on steroids man who literally wanted to walk by me, even though I had the right of way. I was walking in this direction first. And he literally made it so that I had to stop. And then he looked at me and sort of stared at me until I said something like, go ahead, politely, and then he stomped by. So I really hear you, because I thought about that later and I was like, how small must this person feel inside that he feels the need to assert dominance over someone who's physically much smaller, who intended him no harm, who just wanted to put up a piece of equipment. And how also through the assertion of that power, it created a permanent disconnect between me and that person, because now whenever I see him, I associate him with fear or a threat or something negative. So one of the things that I can't help but wonder about, in light of the fact that psychedelics are repeatedly on this show and everywhere you go associated with connection, is there in your mind a relationship between power and human connection, or connection you might to the divine or to the providential or whatever? And then is there a connection, is there a relationship between connection with the divine or with other human beings and the ability to do something with your genius if you have it?
Absolutely, 100%. There's a very direct correlation because, in my definition of power, power propagates, it spreads, it empowers. Power empowers. Power cannot and will not disempower. And that is for me connection. Is that when we channel a divine mission, we are bringing more light into the world. We are spreading the light, we are spreading the power, we are giving more power to people. That is real power. Power feeds power and fear feeds fear. Like for me, this is so clear that it's two separate tracks.
Ayahuasca, as well as other psychedelics, as you have implied, and as we've seen again over and over on this show, gives people insight. One might say, as you do at least sometimes, genius. How do you know if what you've been given through your experience with this medicine is genius or just a random flight of fancy that you have?
It's tricky. It's really tricky because there are two sides to ayahuasca. One is that it opens you up to genius, and the other is that it inflates your ego. It puts you into an ego trip, and like it takes some time to master this. I mean, when I say some time, I would say years to really master it because uh, the ego is very tricky. It's very subtle, and there's so many layers of the ego. And I would say, the difference is power and fear. And ego inflation is happening because of fear. And uh, the divine channel opens through power. There's really no mixing of these two channels. But we have so many narratives that are fear disguised as power that we can very easily get confused. So having a skilled facilitator, a skilled interpreter who can, you know, not just see and think, but feel your energy. Are you responding from fear? Is there a need to prove something? I think this is one of the a great ways to discern: is it power, is it fear? Is why are you doing it? What's the actual purpose? And underneath it all, you know why you're doing it. And fear often is about proving something. It's look how good I am. I need some validation. I am worthy. I'm finally worthy, of something because I did something. I'm worthy rather than I am worthy by default. And I've been given this divine gift and divine power because I'm worthy. It's not because I need to prove something. I am inherently worthy. So the divine chose me to fulfill a mission. Doesn't make me the chosen one, as in, the one, but I am one of the chosen ones. And there are many chosen ones. And I do believe everyone can become the chosen one if they can align to that reality. That's what it is about. It's about connecting to power and truly sacrificing your ego for a bigger mission, for a greater purpose. Because there you're giving yourself to others. It's not about you. It's not about how great I am. It really is about serving the mission, serving others. Not at your own expense, but it's not about the things that people usually do all of this for.
I was having a conversation with a friend that ties into this theme. He is someone who knows he wants to be able to accelerate his life, his impact, create a stronger, more lasting legacy. Uh, but he has himself said, I'm afraid to make the changes that are necessary. In his case, the changes that he was talking about were all related to finances and kind of being on the verge of being broke all the time. And as we were talking, he realized that it was not necessarily a fear of failure or a fear of what he would experience were he to be more successful, but a fear of leaving behind this identity that he had developed at his core as someone who is constantly on this edge and surviving on this financial edge. And so, one of the things that I am hearing that you can possibly then access through ayahuasca or other psychedelics is maybe a set of tools to give you insight as to what it is exactly that's truly at this core of identity that you're afraid to give up. Is that something that you see happen to people? And going as to the facilitators, how did you come to be able to be someone that was able to get that sense around people?
Okay, so two questions. Yes, I will answer the first one. Is that is one of the most common experiences on ayahuasca specifically. I mean, there are many psychedelics, and each has a very different nature, very different experience. But ayahuasca is deeply insightful, and the way it fires up your brain does lead to a lot of insight. Um, and I just want to drop it in here is that there are ways to access that level of insight as a permanent state. You don't have to keep drinking ayahuasca or taking psychedelics. Like, this is my work now. I was training for a long time and I drank ayahuasca, every month for about four. I would drink at least 4 to 5 times every month, for about 8 years. So that's how it reached that number of about 600. Um, but coming back to your question, insight, it's very interesting because I feel like to get the real insight, the real breakthrough, you have to be able to look at the fear. And this is something people avoid, and that is where the ego inflation happens. Is that when you start approaching the fear. So let's just, let's say that there is a fear of uh, being abandoned because I am unworthy.
Yeah.
Now this fear has so many layers. You Ayahuasca can really help you to cut through straight to the core of the fear. But for that, you need to be really bold, really courageous, really prepared, and really in your power to be able to see the fear, to be able to expose that fear and say, yes, this is who I am, this is how I feel. But usually, what happens is that it's more of a gradual descent towards the fear. And when I say descent, it's not really directional; it's just conceptual.
Mm-hmm.
As we are approaching the fear starts reacting and responding, and that is where it starts bringing up fantasies and stories and partial insights or half truths is how I like to call it, which will
Mm.
distract us from getting to the real fear. So you have, and that is the ego just doing its function, is protecting us from things that it believes that we are incapable of facing. So a lot of my work as a mentor is being able to detect that when someone is escaping, when someone is avoiding, when they haven't really had that breakthrough. That's why I don't work with a lot of people. I only work with people who are ready for the breakthrough because I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste their time, energy, money. I and it's not really interesting for me to indulge people's egos. There's no judgment at all. And it
Mm-hmm.
is a process and it takes time, but usually for me it's so much more interesting to cut through and break through and just go beyond the fear and come into power, come into genius. Like let's get to our missions. Let's get to what we are meant to be doing at higher and higher levels. Because another thing I see a lot is people who access power and who access genius, but then they hit a threshold and they start stagnating, and then it's just looping around the same circles again. To actually keep evolving and going to higher levels, which is why I use the word expansion and stability. You know, we need to expand, and then we need to reach this new level and stabilize there, and then go to the next level of expansion. But a lot of people just hit the plateau, and then they may plateau and go down after that. That's
Mm.
the usual trajectory. We think that there is a peak and then life is just downwards from there. But honestly, there is no peak. We have the capability for constant and infinite evolution, but we need to stabilize. Like that stabilization phase is very important before the next expansion can take place. So what a lot of people experience is that they will just keep expanding, 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 but there's no foundation to land on. So what happens when the crash comes? You go all the way down. You go all the way
Wow.
down. So that's why for me this whole expansion and stabilization is it creates new levels of foundation, creates new baselines, so that we can take risks of jumping higher, so that if we crash, we only crash into our previous level where we have become stable already. But people, when they start with psychedelics, often they just want to fly to the edge of the universe and beyond, and they want to go to other other levels and realities.
Yeah.
And then what happens? You crash, and you crash so hard. And I have gone through that. So I'm talking from experience. I have crashed so many times before learning this lesson of creating a foundation, creating a baseline, so that really gives me the trust and the power to take big leaps, because I know I will only fall this far.
How do I know, going back to something that you mentioned earlier, if I'm considering engaging with ayahuasca, that I am someone who is at that initial level where I'm ready for the sort of breakthrough that you're talking about? Because my suspicion is that 99.9% of the people listening to or watching this episode will agree with you. They don't want their time and their energy to be wasted with ayahuasca. They want to have the optimal experience possible. But if you're saying that they may or may not be ready, okay, how do I know that I'm not, especially because as we both know, there are people out there that will take you on these ayahuasca journeys, the ayahuasca tourist industry, right? And not really give a darn about what happens to you. They're just looking for the money or looking to get out of you whatever they can. And I can't imagine that that's something that anyone would really want to experience for themselves.
I wouldn't say that most of them don't care. I would say most of them do care, but they still don't know what they're doing. They don't have enough
Mm,
experience. I trained for 8 years before going solo. I
mhm,
was apprenticing for 8 years with a master before going solo, learning a lot through my own journey. I know of a lot of people who will drink ayahuasca 5, 10, 15 times and start giving it out to other people. They have very good intentions. They do care deeply. They want to awaken the world. They want to save the world. They want to heal the world and all of that. But the number of people who have bad experiences and really tragic outcomes is it's sad, because then ayahuasca gets blamed, and it's not ayahuasca, it's the person who's handing it out irresponsibly. The plant
mm,
is power. The plant is pure power, and you do not just hand out power to people who are not ready for it.
mhm,
This is
mhm,
the responsibility that I feel. I obviously take this responsibility very seriously, and I do not just give ayahuasca to anyone. There is a preparation period for me to know that it's time for you to drink. It's you. I know you well enough that we can really make the most out of that experience, so that you don't also have to keep drinking, and you can have one, two, three, even four experiences, but what you get out of them truly and completely and definitively changes your life. It's not, well, 2 months later I'm just back to doing what I was doing. I am not interested in working with such people. I want people who are actually committed to changing their lives. That, I think, is the first question you need to ask yourself: is that, are you just doing this as a bucket list experience? Are you doing it because it's
mm.
trending? Are you doing it because you think it's a magic pill that will fix your life? It is not. I have really wanted it to be that magic pill, but it's not. Unfortunately, I would love for it to be, but the amount of effort that is required to actually change your life, just it doesn't change. The only thing ayahuasca gives you is access to the insight, but you have to do the work. Nothing changes about that, ever, ever, ever. And it's one of the toughest lessons I've had to learn. At every level, I wanted it to be a magic pill. It's like, okay, now I did the work. Now maybe the next level can be magic. Maybe the next level can. Magic is real, but it happens when you're putting effort and using your power in your everyday life. And that is when real magic starts happening.
Yet you're touching on something that I had planned on getting back to, that was beneath a statement or two that you made a little earlier. And that was the idea of stabilization, expansion and stabilization. Before we get into more detail about exactly what expansion and stabilization look like, I have to wonder, uh, when hearing those terms, if you are saying that, and I know you said just a few seconds ago, okay, maybe it'll be 4 or 5 experiences that are meaningful, that can change your life. You don't have to be doing it 4 times a month for 8 years, as I did. But if we are constantly expanding and then stabilizing, embedded in that, at least to my ears, is the idea that if ayahuasca is the portal through which you're able to access your expansion, and on some level or another, as long as you're alive and want to continue to access that power, you would need to go back to it. But am I hearing something that's not necessarily what you said at all?
So, yes, I would say that there is a misinterpretation in what I'm saying. You do not need to keep drinking ayahuasca every time you want to go to the next level, but it's not a rule. You can. Many people do visit it once a year or once every level. I think as long as you have the intention and you hold it as something sacred, and in between that you're doing the work, there's no harm in revisiting it. It's actually really good for your body, mind, soul, spirit, everything, your heart. It's really good for everything, even in a physical sense. But there are ways to access that state without having to take anything. So I am interested in both paths. I don't feel that my my relationship with ayahuasca in a physical sense is complete or over. Maybe it never will be. But obviously, the amount and the frequency has changed significantly. I've taken breaks for over a year, and it's for me. I would say I'm actually higher, so to speak, than I was drinking ayahuasca a year or two ago. I feel way higher now because I have been doing the work to access those states and live in those states, and I have learned how to go in and out of them. So this is also something I teach people. But again, this has come after 11 years of drinking. So each person has their journey, and as long as it's something that is required or helpful, I think it's very valid to keep going with it.
You get the insights through your ayahuasca journey. You have your genius. How then, from a process perspective, does someone move from that into an expansion phase? Like, do they have ongoing? We've talked about in other episodes integration, which might be one or two post uh, post journey sessions, but are you talking about something more comprehensive than that? Are you talking about something that is less comprehensive than that, or something completely different? Explain a little bit about what methodology you use to transition from insight and genius into implementation and expansion into power.
Okay, so the way I will answer your question is by saying, let's just assume that we have some foundation. Okay, we have some baseline, whatever it is, no judgment, whatever is your each person's baseline, you have this baseline. What I believe happens when you're exposed to power in any form, whether it's through ayahuasca, whether it's through, I also have worked and working on mastering other practices such as Kundalini or Tantra, yoga.
Mm.
All of these are portals to the same thing in my experience. They all lead us to the same states. And when I say yoga, it's not about posturing, it's about the yoga of consciousness. So just to clarify that.
Thank you.
Whenever someone gets exposed to power, they have a peak experience, which means that you have a baseline and you're taken to a new level. You're exposed to a new level of reality, a new level of power, a new level of genius, everything. A new, I call it the everything experience. So my name is Tio. It's short for the infinite zero, and the infinite zero experience is the everything experience. Is how do I experience everything? It's power, it's pleasure, it's fun, joy, fulfillment, peace, happiness, everything. And the dark side of reality also, that there is, it's everything. There is no excluding anything. So coming back, we get exposed to a new level, but we come down from it very quickly, and it's inevitable. We come back to our baseline. Unless we just keep drinking and we keep going to higher and higher levels, we will still crash to whatever our baseline is. It's inevitable. So my work with people is, okay, you have that exposure, you have that expansion. That's what I call the expansion. But then you come back, you contract pretty quickly. And the difference now is that you have been shown what is your potential, what is your next level. And now in that in between phase, you do the daily work to, to gradually expand into your new shell, let's call it. So let's say our baseline is one shell, like the snake's skin. It breaks open. We get exposed to the new shell that's on the outside. But then the work in between is to construct that shell and to fill up that shell, to take up that new space. That is expansion of power. People are very uncomfortable taking up that new space because suddenly you are so much bigger than you were. And people are so used to being the little tiny them that
Mm.
they are. But expansion means more responsibility, and this is something people are terrified of. They have so many bad associations with responsibility, and I'm saying it from personal experience. I hated it. I hated it. I hated responsibility. I just wanted to be responsible for myself, if that. If that. I would even prefer someone else was responsible for me. A lot of the times I was giving over my responsibility to other powers, other people. governments, everyone else has to take care of me, be responsible for me. So taking personal responsibility was a big deal for me, a big step for me. And then expanding that into being responsible for other people, being responsible for the collective, being responsible for the world, for humanity, to keep this world alive. That is a mission. That is a mission. Is responsibility. That is when you take power. Why am I taking power? Why am I about expanding power? Because I care about making an impact, about helping this world, about taking this world to the next level of evolution. That's why I want power. If we just basically keep talking about empowerment and we let the evil people, so to speak, take all the power, but we don't actually take power ourselves, what are we left with? So the evil people just keep taking more power, and we just keep disempowering those who are even trying to have more power because of cancel culture and woke culture and all of this. Anyone who is even trying to be powerful is being cancelled. So, but that doesn't stop the evil and the bad people from taking more power. So they continue taking. We feel cancelled. We feel small. We just regress into our holes. And what ends up happening? We just keep repeating the same cycle. So to learn to work with power, responsibility, it's a lot of it's daily work. It's daily work to take responsibility for yourself, to take responsibility for the world, to do what you're meant to be doing, to speak to people, to activate people, to go out there, to have these kinds of conversations, to have uncomfortable conversations, to exercise power where you stand up, where you make other people uncomfortable, where you disagree. All of those are challenges for a lot of people. And even people who are considered powerful have struggles with these things, that they may be able to enforce authority on people who are lower than them, but with peers or people who are higher than them, they're super uncomfortable. So they just silo themselves, in their enterprise, and within that they feel powerful, but they go out into the world and they feel very weak unless they have their band of bullies with them. So this is what, when I say power, it's about all of this. It's learning to be in integrity, learning to be in wholeness, learning to be, you know, with the mission and the responsibility to help this world.
I agree that the idea of taking responsibility is something that is scary for people. It is bad enough, as you just suggested, and I put bad in quotes, to have to take responsibility for yourself, but to move into responsibility towards others. Maybe those in your immediate circle. Again, that can be hard work, particularly if it's done radically. And then moving out into the whole world, people that you don't even know or people that might not even exist yet, taking some responsibility and being accountable for them. Um, with that in mind, do you think it is then realistic that ayahuasca's true ability to tap into and bring out the power in people is ever going to be something that's truly realized? Or do you think it's ultimately, at its peak, always going to be something um, that is truly most effectively utilized by a small minority of people? And I ask that because a lot of the promise of the psychedelic renaissance is that if you simply make these things available to everybody, then they'll feel all of this connection, they'll have all of these insights, and will suddenly all come together, and literally things like racism and tyranny and social isolation and addiction will just vanish within a generation.
I do not believe in that vision anymore. I was very attached to that idea. And that's what I said. A lot of people who drink ayahuasca 5, 10, 15, 20 times, even 50 times. It's such a pleasant illusion. It's such a pleasant vision to be like, yeah, if everyone drinks ayahuasca, everything will be love and peace and light. I love that vision. But it doesn't happen with everyone drinking ayahuasca or taking psychedelics or mushrooms or whatever, because ayahuasca and psychedelics amplify the ego for those who are not ready to face the fear, who are not ready to step into power and love. They just get their egos amplified, and this is what happens to most people. Most people just keep talking about love and light, but they live in fear. They live in extreme fear. So I don't believe that mass availability actually changes anything until people have the courage to face fear and step into power. It's not just to face fear, but actually step into power and take charge and do the difficult things, which is what this whole love and light community does not do that. They just keep talking and talking and talking and talking. But there's so much conflict in the love and light community. There's so much uh, backstabbing and there's so much toxicity. And they talk about love and light, but the way that they treat each other, they're constantly projecting and canceling each other and hating on each other. But they keep talking about it. Or you need to drink more ayahuasca because you cannot see your shadow. The one saying that is equally responsible and liable.
It is very fascinating, though, because when I think about people that are in the love and light community, sort of what I might call the spiritual community or the new thought community, or those that are that have found some sort of self-proclaimed level of enlightenment through ayahuasca or other sacred plants, they do seem like good people. And it is hard, at least initially, to look at people that have gone through this sort of conversion, for a lack of better word, and say, well, your concern and about, at least apparent concern about other human beings and about bringing joy and about transforming the world, it doesn't appear to be selfish. I think that one of the things that's revelatory for me about this conversation is that ego amplification doesn't necessarily have to show itself up as being a braggart or being boastful or anything, but it can show up in more subtle sort of ways.
There is a lot of good intention. It's exactly what I said. A lot of the people, it's not that they don't care. They care. They care deeply. They feel a lot. They want to help the world. They want to save the world. They want to heal the world. I truly, genuinely believe this. But whether they're going about it the right way, they actually know that this works? We have this belief, we have this assumption that if everyone drinks ayahuasca and takes psychedelics, the world will be healed. But it's just an assumption. No one's ever tested it out. We saw what happened in the 60s. There was the that was called the second wave or the first wave, whatever it was called. But there was a lot of negativity there too. There was lots of positive things when everyone was just taking LSD and it was that era, but there was also a lot of not so great things happening at the same time. And fortunately or unfortunately, I don't think everyone can just become a hippie and drink ayahuasca or take mushrooms or take LSD and be in love and light. The world still needs to function. If we just go into that, we go back to nature, we go back to the primitive times. Nature is violent, nature is rough, nature is powerful and aggressive, which is why we built civilization. But somehow there's this whole negativity around civilization because it's corporations and all of this. But why I so strongly disagree with this vision of the world being completely peaceful, this utopia that everyone wants, is that it's just a utopian dream, and in my opinion, it's a fantasy. The reality of Earth is much closer to nature. That there's beauty and there's violence, there's light and there's dark, and that's just life. It's reality. It's the universe. It's the creation of the universe happened in violent explosions. That was the creation of the universe. But we have this idea that God just waved a wand and created the universe, and everything can just be as peaceful and loving as that. It's like, why can't we just all get along? That's not how life functions.
Even as I'm listening to you say that, I can't help but think about the ayahuasca experience itself. It's not known for being particularly gentle. Right? If anything, you hear stories about people vomiting and having to wear diapers and having convulsions, all sorts of things that are violent as part of the journey. And that leads then to a final thing that I wanted to talk about before we swoop into something that you said that was like catnip to my ears at the very beginning of this conversation. I'm not going to let it go, but we'll get back to that in a minute, which is to the extent to which people have quote unquote bad trips or frightening, terrifying experiences with ayahuasca. And I want to qualify this, not those sort of experiences that are because of a set or setting that has been poorly designed, or because of a facilitator that didn't know what they were doing, or because of a whole host of other things. But for those who, nonetheless, even having taken the appropriate harm reduction steps and have vetted the person that they're working with and are in the ideal setting, they still have a terrible experience. Are those in any way counterproductive, or experiences that can take people away from power, or are they actually part of this process of violence as a catalyst for expansion?
Violence is a very tricky term. So maybe, when I say violent, it's not about hurting someone. That's one type of violence, but there's just this violence that exists in nature. Nature is violence. So I just want to clarify that when we speak of violence, that's the term we are more associating. That's the definition we are more associating with. And this is what I said. Until we learn to understand, or until we understand that ayahuasca is both love and power, it's not just love and light. It's love and power. We are getting exposed to phenomenal love. That is one experience of ayahuasca. It's got this unconditional absolute love and beauty, which is nothing that you can experience in the human dimension. It's a level of love that just it is beyond human. That's the only way to put it. And the same goes with the power. And power is not pleasant. Power is not comfortable. Power has a tough side to it. Let's use the word tough. And it requires us to confront very difficult truths about the nature of life and reality. And there's a lot of denial about this. And it's so much nicer to stick to the love and light vision and illusion instead of confronting the nature of power. We talk about empowerment, but we cannot actually confront the real nature of power itself.
I am being reminded of terms that you often hear people use with regards to ayahuasca. Mother ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is the portal of the divine feminine. When I hear you talk about this profound love that can be accessed through ayahuasca, I'm imagining the divine feminine. And I'm hearing you describe ayahuasca a lot more expansively than that, because when I'm hearing words like tough and confronting, and even in this very, and I think you made a fair point, this very limited understanding of violence, right? Like, that's something I tend to associate with the divine masculine. Are you suggesting that some of the stereotyping that is out there in the popular discourse around ayahuasca as this feminine thing is perhaps a bit limited?
In my opinion, it's severely limited, but it's not Western, it's actually traditional. The term Mother Ayahuasca uh, is coming from the shamanic lineages. So I wouldn't attribute that to the West. Maybe it's been popularized in the West, but I wouldn't attribute it originally to the West. But at the same time, that's not my understanding of it. Because, especially, this is the most fascinating thing, is that where while I was training, I also learned how to brew the ayahuasca. And the source ingredients are four. There are four source ingredients. One is a plant. Typically, it's called the scientific name for it is Psychotria viridis or something like that. And that is what contains the DMT. And that is considered to give the visions. It's considered to be the light, and it's considered to be the feminine aspect of ayahuasca. The second ingredient is a wine. And that is it's the Banisteriopsis capi wine. That's a scientific name for it. And that is considered to be the force. It's considered to be what has the purgative qualities, it's considered to be the masculine. And the other two ingredients are water and fire. That's all it takes to make ayahuasca. It's a very intense process. It's very physically demanding. It's very long. How the shamans came up with it is a whole different story. But these are the four ingredients. We have water, fire, a plant, and a wine. Two are feminine, two are masculine. Fire is usually associated with masculine, water is generally associated with the feminine. So we have this perfect balance of these four coming together to create not a masculine nor a feminine, but a union of these two. That for me is ayahuasca. It's both combined. It's both combined. It's not one or the other. It's what happens when the divine feminine and the divine masculine become one in harmony. That for me is ayahuasca. It's neither one or the other. And that is my practice. That's what the state of yoga is actually about. Is yoga, the root of the word is union. Union of what with what? Is a union of the human with the divine, the light with the dark, with the masculine with the feminine. That's the state we are all accessing. And again, this is the very uncomfortable part of ayahuasca that is actually trying to be eradicated in the West. They want to just pick out the chemicals which are giving us the visions, thinking that that's what ayahuasca is all about. We just want the DMT, we just want this, we just want that. We don't want to go through the purging. Why do we need to purge? There's no purpose of purging. We just, let's just make it easier, more comfortable, more light, more beautiful, more feminine. But it's a big cultural movement that's it's there in the zeitgeist today that we want to erase masculinity. We want to erase what we are calling toxic masculinity, but strength, power, force, rage, these are part of the masculine, and raging can be done for violent, negative reasons. It can also be done to build and create. You can rage against the dying of the light, as the famous poem goes.
That is really deep. Something else, like I said, that I want to make sure that we get back to was is related to a description of the ayahuasca experience that you had way back when you first began your current journey. You said that you saw your future, or at least parts of your future, and that these things came true. We, by the way, have had other guests on this show, one of which, by the way, is a very well respected South African scientist who also have described these things happening. Talk to us a little bit more about what that looked like for you, maybe what you think is going on.
There's so many ways to answer this question. um, like I said, to be very clear, I was shown glimpses of a timeline. I obviously had the choice not to follow the timeline, to just ignore those visions and continue with my life the way it was. Perhaps some way or the other, life would have still forced me onto that timeline. I don't know. There's no way of telling anymore. But I did choose to make that decision, and one timeline collapsed and another one opened, and that glimpses of that timeline that I had seen were experienced later in life, which is what I call deja vu. Deja vu for me is, and we all know it, is experiencing the same moment twice. What happens there? There's so many philosophies and theories, and I have my own philosophy and theory, which I don't really want to get into because is it requires going really deep, and I don't think it's in the scope of this discussion. But I do believe that time is just it's a very misunderstood dimension, and psychedelics and ayahuasca can potentially, not always as a guarantee, not just because we want it, but they can allow us to tap into that dimension. So it's a lot of people just want to see the future. They want to see what will happen, but they want it for all the wrong reasons. They just want some kind of certainty or guarantee that everything will be okay, and that's
Mm.
not what ayahuasca gives you.
Mhm.
I was not being shown this vision to be told that everything will be okay. It was, I mean, if anything, it was one of the scariest things to pursue, is to give up a job at Amazon as a software developer in Seattle. It's one of the highest paying jobs in the world. I was 24 at the time, just at the beginning of my career, having been promoted. I had my whole career ahead of me.
Yeah.
I could have made millions, millions. Okay, I would have gotten promoted more. Amazon stock went up like crazy. I would have just been getting stock more and more. I would have been making millions. So to give that up, there was no security. There was no guarantee that I will go to the jungle and everything's going to work out.
Yeah.
There is no guarantee there. I could have anything could have happened. That's the reason people want to see the future, is that they want to know that they will be safe and everything will be okay. That's not how faith works. That's not how inner security works. Those are things I had to work on, is to create the sense of security that I am okay no matter what. You spoke about the money topic earlier. When I quit my job, I had savings, but I actually end up using all my savings to build a house.
Mm.
So I end up being very close to having nothing much. And I was completely okay with it because I had trust in my ability to create and earn. I knew that, okay, so what if I don't have money? I'll just earn more money. I will create something and I will build something and I will earn more money. That's where trust and faith comes from. It's from power. If our trust and faith is located in just knowing that everything will be fine because someone else is taking care of us, that's a very weak faith. It's
Yeah.
very difficult to keep that faith. But when it's rooted in your own power, and then you trust that there are forces that are going to help you out and aligned with you because you are in alignment. Sure, that's a bonus. It's an icing on the cake, but it doesn't replace my inner strength, my inner capability and responsibility to to provide for myself. And that is again, the masculine, the provider. I can provide for myself and I can provide for others.
Tio, listening to you utter those words, I circle back to what, for me, has been the most insightful and impactful element of this conversation. Although there's been a lot that's been insightful and impactful. I'm just picking one out that is landing with me in the moment. And that is the theme of responsibility. When you saw these snippets of your future, you said that they were a possible timeline, that you had to take responsibility for stepping into. Expanding into your power means expanding the scope of your willingness to accept responsibility over your life, which your own story demonstrates. Thinking about love and light and wanting everything to be peaceful and easy and comfortable means that you are, in a way, abdicating responsibility for dealing with the very processes that are fundamental to nature that lead to the evolution of our consciousnesses as well as life itself on this planet. Responsibility for not just taking the genius, but for actually doing the work that's necessary to turn that genius into power, and responsibility for understanding what power is and living that way, as opposed to just being driven irresponsibly by the need to dominate or to feed the beast, the ego. That's a lot for me to ponder in the future. I'm curious as to whether there's anything that you would like the audience to ponder on more as we each step into our own future timelines, or if there's something that you didn't get a chance to say that you would like to share with us that can help us move forward with any of the wonderful pieces of advice as well as thoughts that you have brought into the room today.
First I will just shortly riff on what you just said, because one of the insights I had from that is, one of the things I've seen is that a lot of people are pursuing money and wealth to get comfortable, so that they reach a place where they don't have to think about and worry about money and life is good and they are safe. They're pursuing safety. Really speaking, they're just pursuing safety. And that is when people tend to stagnate and plateau, is that they have reached the level that makes them comfortable, that makes them feel safe, and there's no need to do anything more. They are good for life. They're probably, their next two generations are good for life. But that is not the purpose of power and wealth. The real purpose is, in my opinion, is to build heaven on earth. Heaven on earth is a multi-millennia vision that has been unfolding since the times of the prophets who brought that vision, but they were only able to bring that vision. We are actually in the position to build that vision into reality. But there was a phase in between where we needed to embody heaven before we can build it on the outside, which is to feel heaven within, to feel peace, to feel fulfilled, to feel pleasure, to feel joy, to feel love. That's heaven within, and then we build heaven on the outside. That is, in my opinion, the purpose of power and wealth, is to build heaven on earth. And so I would actually ask people is that if you're pursuing power, genius, money, wealth, whatever it is you're pursuing, why is it that you're actually pursuing it? What do you actually want to do with it? What do you want to build with it? It's not to heal something, to fix something, to tear down something, but what do you actually want to build? What is your vision for heaven and earth? And are you actually going to do it? Or are you just going to fantasize about it and watch Netflix and live in the virtual heaven rather than an actual physical heaven, which we have the power to build? But we are being given this very cheap substitute of reality, which is virtual. Now, more so with AI. We already had the television addiction. Now it's going to VR and AI, and it's just becoming cheaper and cheaper versions of reality. But we have everything we need to build a true heaven on earth. And that is one of my missions, is to do my part in making that happen.
By finding our mission, taking responsibility, acting on it, I've come to believe, after that set of statements, that building heaven really can be possible.
Just before you conclude, I want to make very clear that heaven is not utopia. Heaven is not utopia. Heaven is constant struggle against the darkness in this world. It's There's always going to be death, there's always going to be destruction, there's always going to be dark forces. We do not have to sit back and wait for them to take over. We don't have to wait for them to be healed before we can build heaven. We keep building heaven as we've been building this world in the face of darkness and struggle and resistance and suffering.
What I'm hearing there is the idea of heaven as continuing to engage with the struggle of its own creation, and feeling that sense of triumph that can come from that. And that is a pretty powerful, to go back to the theme of our discussion today, way of being in the world, maybe tapping into our own genius. Ti0, how can folks find out more about you? Where can they go? What do you have going on?
Well, in keeping with the theme of virtual being cheap, I was teaching online for 5 years. For the past 5 years since the pandemic started, I started teaching online, but I have actually started withdrawing. I have completely withdrawn from teaching online, and I have also pretty much minimized my social media presence. I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I may create something on YouTube. I have my website. I'm not sharing a lot of details. It's more for people to find out. If they want to find out, they can reach out to me. I only share details about my experiences privately. So, and there's a reason for that. It's really not for the masses. It's really not for everyone. It's for people who actually want to make real change in themselves, in the world, and go to the next level of power and genius. So, my website is theinfinitezero.com. I'm sure you'll share the link somewhere. Otherwise, yeah, find me somehow. If you're meant to find me, you're going to find me.
And for those who are determined to find Ti0, the website is listed in the caption below the YouTube video, as well as in the show notes below. The website is fascinating. I just looked at it today. I will say that to visit it is to be intrigued. And I like having that sort of emotional experience when I go to a website. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure that you press the subscribe button on YouTube or press the subscribe button on the audio platform that you happen to be listening to. Leave a 5-star review on your audio platform or leave a comment below the YouTube video because we want to know what you think. And once you've done that, be sure to go to our website at webdelics.com. That's WEBDELICS.com. And subscribe to our blog where you will get trusted, quality content about psychedelics, sacred plants, as well as the whole universe of possibilities that they present, as well as honest assessments about what they do not present. Also, make sure that you visit us on our various social media channels because we love engaging with you there. Once you've done all of that, above all else, make sure that you come back again for another episode of the Webdelics podcast.